Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment again. Mr. Ignacio Esteban. I'm not counting anymore. I don't even know what number this is.
Yeah, I've lost count, man. You're right.
Because sometimes we have videos that we have in for a little bit that don't get released. So, you might even have one in the can for all I know, for crying out loud. But back again, always a fun time as always. And we got a good response from the serial killer when we covered Bundy and Dahmer and Gacy. Good
Yeah.
response on the shorts that we put out, good response on the video. So I think I do a little show with Ruggiano, Anthony Ruggiano,
Mm,
called Behind the Gangster, where we just
yeah.
kind of do deep dives into certain mobsters. And I thought it'd be a good idea for me and you to do a behind the serial killer. And, you know, a lot of these guys, I mean, have done some really bad stuff. I mean, just
Yeah.
horrible. But when you start doing this kind of stuff to kids, that's another level of evil. It's
Hmm.
bad enough you're killing women and, children, or whatever families, but when it's like someone solely focuses on children, that's another level of evil. And one guy that done that, worse than probably anybody I've ever read about was a guy by the name of Albert Fish. And
Albert Fish, yes.
I think you have a chapter about him in one of your books.
Yeah, yeah. Psycho Killers. Yeah, it's either chapter 9 or chapter 10. But yeah, he got my attention. He got my attention, especially he's the original boogeyman, right?
Yes.
The later dubbed the vampire of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Uh
he's got like
he-
5 nicknames, man. The Gray Man, the Werewolf of
yeah,
Wysteria, the Brooklyn
yes,
Vampire, the Moon Maniac, the Boogey Man. And looking at him, he looks like somebody's grandpa. Like
yes.
he's your prototypical grandpa that you would never think would be capable of doing such horrible things that we'll get in here today. And I've never put out a disclaimer on any video that I've ever done because
Mm.
you are watching a crime show, crime and entertainment. But I am going to put it out there before we get into this. So this is going to be some pretty graphic detail and some brutal stuff, and most pretty much all of them involves children. So if that's not your cup of tea, maybe this is a video you don't want to, look at. I just feel like this is so bad, and the stuff that he did. I do want to put that disclaimer out before we
That's a
get
good idea.
started.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get into it here. Albert Fish, born May 19th, 1870, passed away, thankfully, January 16th, 1936. Again, we've covered serial killer, rapist, child molester, cannibal, committed at least 3 that he was convicted
Oh,
on. Gotta
I
be.
think he did a lot more.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
think he
I
did
think
more too.
he did a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more. And as we covered also, like I said, many nicknames. He was known as the Gray Man, the Boogey Man, the Werewolf of Hysteria, or Wisteria, excuse me, the Brooklyn Vampire, Moon Maniac, a lot of different names. But I mean, a weird childhood because if I'm not mistaken, his father was like 43 years older than his
He
mother.
was his father was 75 when he was born.
Gee.
75 years apart when he was born. But he came from a family of people. He was the youngest of 3 and a family that had mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
His father had schizophrenia and his mother will have hallucinations.
Yep.
So really bad combination there. And when his father passed away, the mom couldn't handle them. And I think this is what triggers he comes from a family. There are people who are born psychopaths, people who are made psychopaths, and I think he's a combination of both
Mm-hmm.
because I think he had it in his genes. And then I think what I was reading all the horrors when mom dropped him in the orphanage in the 1870s in DC, he suffered a lot there,
Yeah.
verbally, physically, sexually. He was very much an abused child, and
Yes.
and that
St.
he
John
becomes a
Orphanage,
product
I
of
think.
everything. Yeah, he becomes a product of that kind of abuse, which plays out, manifests. They all say the same thing. We've talked about other serial killers. Just sidetrack here. Pedro Lopez, when was interviewed, he asked him, "Why were you killing so many children?" Because I was abused,
Mm-hmm.
I was attacked, and I wanted to do the same kind of punishment. This guy was the same way. He was way before Pedro Lopez and all these other guys like the Bundys and Dahmers and Gacy's we talked about. But a lot of them have that trend. All these guys were somewhat abused some way, right? So they had issues. So
And that's
this
where
this
he
guy
said
is no
this
different.
the sexual gratification of the physical torture. This is where he kind of started to realize that they were kind of linked together because he would get
Yeah.
heat from some of the staff. And then that's when he would say that, like, he would watch some of these kids get beat, and it would be arousing to him. Like, it would be sexually gratifying to watch these kids get beat.
Yeah, it didn't bother him. That's for sure. That's for sure. And eventually, mom would take him back, and then there was other weird stuff going on there, and then she would leave him, and then he would have to raise his siblings, right? But he already began doing a lot of strange things, and he had hallucinations. He thought he was John the Baptist, right? And then he would start poking himself with needles and stabbing himself and doing a lot of sadomasochistic things to himself, right? And that will play out later in his life, which I thought was fascinating too.
Yeah, well, she picked him up. I think he was around 12. It was 1882 from my notes here. And he had began a relationship. And this is where he was kind of introduced. There's a name for it. I'm scared I'll butcher it, but it's in short, it's drinking urine. And there's another
name. Feces.
Yeah, and eating feces. I don't
Yes, he did a lot of that.
To do the correct terminology of those. I'll butcher them too bad. But yeah, drinking urine and eating feces. And he began to visit like public bathhouses where at this point he could watch boys undress. And, he would spend a great portion of his time in there on the weekends, like watching this. So he's already got the makings of a not so good individual here.
He is someone who's making of nothing else a sexual deviant.
Yeah, for sure. And then he moved.
It gets worse, unfortunately. If you say it's a pervert, that's fine. But no, it gets worse. It gets a lot worse for this guy.
Yeah, a lot worse. And 1890, I think it was, he was about 20 years old. He moved to New York City. Then he started engaging in like male prostitution. He began molesting and raping young boys, mostly younger than 6. Like he went fairly young. And then
he liked them young.
Yeah. And then 1898, his mother actually arranged for him to be married. How did she arrange this? I think it was with Anna Mary Hoffman, who was 9 years younger than him. How did that? Do you know anything about how that came about?
Yeah, she arranged it. I think from a family friend when I was reading, and they would get married and they would have kids. I don't have the exact amounts in my book, how many kids they have. I want to say they had like at least 4, and everything they said, he never abused or did anything to his children. A lot of these guys have that trend. They take care of their family, right? But they have no problem abusing someone else's kids or doing worse to them. But everything appeared that he didn't do anything to his kids, which is interesting on there. But before he gets married, and this is when he went to New York City. I don't know if you had this story. This is a kind of a telling story where I think he almost killed someone. This one here in 1890, he has his gay relationship with a 19-year-old. He's a little bit older than the guy, and he gets involved, like I said, in a very, very sadomasochistic relationship. Right? Easy for me to say.
And I think is out.
Sadomasochistic, and then they get involved. He severs his penis in half. But the guy, they're in a ranch, a farm ranch out, but he screams so loud he's afraid other people heard him. So what he does is, instead of killing him, because his intention was to kill him and dismember him, that didn't happen. So what he does is gets petroleum jelly, wraps it around the severed penis, puts a handkerchief on it, gives him a kiss, and then gives him a bill for $10 for service rendered.
Jesus. Yeah, it said that there was somebody. It was a male lover of his took him to a wax museum. And he was fascinated by the bisection of the human penis and subsequently became, I guess, obsessed with wanting to do that. And that's where he met the kid you're talking about. I think it was in Wilmington, Delaware, is where he met the 19-year-old kid. I think it's Thomas Keaton was his name.
Right.
And I mean, that's exactly. It took him to the old farmhouse, cut half of his penis off, wrapped it up, gave him $10. He said he never
he wanted to kill him.
Yeah, he wanted
to kill him, but he yelled too loud and he got nervous. So he decided not to. So that was his intention right there at 20 years old. Yeah. At 20 years old, ready to kill people and involved in that kind of activity. So
he said he took the first train out of there, never heard what became of the kid, nor did he ever try to find out.
No, that was it. I don't think he paid the $10 either.
I mean, not to like hone in on the money.
That's a lot of money back then.
I was about to say that's I look at $10 now and I'm like, man, that ain't nothing. But back in those days, that's probably like $100 bill or something. I mean,
At
granted,
least,
I'd rather
at
have the
least.
other half of my junk back, but I mean,
Right.
a lot of money.
For severing my my penis. No, no
Yeah,
thanks.
we're gonna need a little bit more money than that, pal. You're gonna have to come off the hip pocket some more. You mentioned the woman that he did marry. She would actually leave him for a handyman that was staying in their house.
Yeah, that's what I heard, you know, and read. Yeah, they had issues there too. I think she probably realized what kind of issues he had, because I don't think he was in a marriage, but like Gacy was, he was married twice,
Yeah.
right? But he told her he was interested in young boys, right? And I think she knew he was interested in young kids, young children. So I think they wouldn't have much of a relationship there. So no doubt that he should go with a handyman.
Well, and then she leaves with the handyman. Said that she pretty much took all of their possessions that they had. Did leave him to be a single father, and surprisingly, as much bad shit as we're going to say about this guy for the rest of this episode, all of his kids said, as far as being a father, he was a good father. And that don't mean that he wasn't weird, because he was starting to, as you alluded to earlier, have these hallucinations. Once wrapped himself in carpet and was saying he was the John the Apostle. He was wrapped himself in
John the
carpet.
Apostle, yeah.
What is the correlation of that? I mean, I probably don't read my Bible as much as I should, but I don't remember John getting naked and wrapping himself in carpet. What is this that he's doing here?
I can't tell you either, other than that he's having hallucinations. And remember, later he would say the voices in his head would tell him to kill children. Remember that? So maybe those same voices told him to do that too. I mean, he's already going that. Remember, schizophrenia, untreated. He has mental health issues from both sides of the family, from the mother and the father. And then, of course, he's being exposed to all this stuff that he's now getting involved in. It's a recipe for disaster. And he would be probably bigger. Some people think that H.H. Holmes would be a serial killer. And that's just past his time. And you know, we'll do a show down the road, people thinking him being Jack the Ripper, one the same because of his ties to England in 1888 and what happened in his background in medicine, almost as a physician. So he just came off the heels of Holmes, who was executed 1890s, right? And now he's coming out as a monster. And he must have known about him too, because that was a big thing when he was executed back in that time. So, you know, they were probably copycatters. And I was just reading, he probably copied some of the stuff that this guy was doing too. He may want to be bigger than Holmes, for sure.
Oh, I'm sure he did. And it was around this time too, especially after his wife left him, he began to indulge in like the self-harm stuff, as you mentioned earlier, embedding needles into his growing and abdomen. Yes. Like some of these pictures, and I'm going to put some of them up here, you know, in the video. Okay. I don't know how do you get needles that deep? I mean, they got an x-ray. He's probably got 15, 20 of them in there. And that's like, I don't understand how you get them that deep in there.
No, he was a masochistic. He just loved pain, and he was ill though. But he also liked to inflict pain too. He liked to receive it, and later he would, like you did with that one guy, he would inflict a lot of pain. I guess he tested his pain threshold level, and then he said, "Oh, I'm going to do this to others too."
Some of the other things that he said he did, he would repeatedly, and I think this is some things he would even ask his kids to do, was beat him with a nail-studded paddle. Once he said he inserted wool into his anus, doused with lighter fluid, and set it on fire.
He did.
Jesus Christ! I mean, I
don't get that either. That's and that's you know, they say, oh, you can't be a time. Listen, this happened in the 1910, you know, maybe or 1920, because he would already leave. So 1890, 1900. So, you know, crazy has been crazy around for a long time.
And there was even talks about him like rumoring to make up these games. I forgot the name of them. It was weird games that he would play, but basically it was like games with his kids and some of their friends where he would like tell them to hold up a number. Buck something. I can't remember what the hell it was. I can't remember it was a weird name. But basically, if he guessed right, then he won. If he guessed wrong, whatever fingers they were holding up, that's how many times they had to hit him. And surprisingly, he never guessed right. So he just liked for him to beat the hell out of him. I mean,
he just liked the pain. That's where, I can't imagine doing that to my dad. That's for sure.
Now, I said around 1919, Fish did stab a disabled boy in Georgetown. He would typically choose people that were either mentally ill, sometimes African American. His explaining of this was that he assumed it would be people that would not be missed. And he would later even claim
homeless.
Homeless
kids. Yeah.
And he would even pay boys to kind of procure children for him and get children for him. Did you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. He was sick that way. He was sick, and he preyed on the weak. Mm-hmm. That's what these guys do. The most vulnerable and the weakest in our society.
And he had, like, if anybody's seen Dexter, Dexter had his kill kit or whatever. Fish had what he called implements of hell. It was a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a small handsaw. Just the thoughts of those things, especially being associated with kids, is just, that's horrible. Horrible that what some of these kids had to go through. And
he liked to choke them and dismember them and then cook them and eat them.
Yes. And we'll get into detail on some of the kids that he did that to. I mean, when I was reading that, my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't even fathom some of the shit that we're going to talk about. 1924, it said Fish found an 8-year-old Beatrice Kill playing along her parents' farm in Staten Island in New York. He offered her money to come help him look for something. It was a lost pet or something like that. He was trying to offer her money, and she was about to leave, and then the mom come out and chased him away. He later returned to the barn. Like later on that day, his father or Beatrice's father discovered him sleeping and ran him away. Then 3 days later, he killed a kid named Francis McDonnell. Remember the Francis McDonnell killing?
Yeah.
Now, that's the one that I want to say he strangled with his suspenders and wound up hanging in a tree.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. Stuff he did to these kids. Young kids never had a chance to have a life, and he would just take advantage of whatever situation. And we'll get to one which I found fascinating, how creative he got. About 1928, when he puts an ad in the paper where he's looking for help in a farm ranch of his that he has outside the city. You want me to get to that one a little bit?
Yeah, we'll get to that one for sure, because that ties into the Gracie blood and everything else.
Everything. It's the main.
There was I want to say a story where he had gotten some neighborhood kids or whatever to his house, asked them if they had lunch or something like that. They were playing around on the bed, and these kids knocked the mattress over and actually seen some of those tools and like got the hell out of there. Thankfully for those kids. I mean, that could have went real bad. And you just think, people, I'm sure probably just seen this kid or seen this guy and thought there's no way that this man could be capable of some of this horrible stuff that was going on.
You think about it. Yeah. You think about all the serial killers that we've talked about. John Wayne Gacy was very popular in the community. He had a construction company. He was Pogo the Clown, right? Mm-hmm. You ever think Pogo the Clown will be taking care of the kids later? Did he hire and do that stuff? Dahmer came across a very quiet demeanor, an introvert, right? He was in the army. He was a medic. He was an army veteran. People don't realize, Dahmer was an army veteran medic, and he would commit house of horrors. And of course, Bundy came across very charismatic. He was going to law school. Oh, you wouldn't think a guy like this with a Volkswagen Beetle would do anything like this, would he?
Right. And that was these guys' MO. And I'm going to read a little bit about that Francis McDonnell killing, because it's got like a telling scene. Some of these things, when people talk about it, it's just something you can visualize, and it's really staggering. And it said the 9-year-old Francis was reported missing after he failed to return home from playing catch with some friends in Port Richmond, Staten Island. Search was organized. As we said, they ultimately found the body hanging in a tree. He had been sexually assaulted, strangled with his suspenders. According to the autopsy, there was lacerations to his leg, abdomen, and left hamstring had almost been entirely stripped off the flesh. Now, Fish initially refused to claim responsibility for this, although he later stated that he did intend to castrate the boy, but fled when he heard someone approaching the area. McDonnell's friends told the police that he was taken by an elderly man with a gray mustache. That's where he got one of his names, the Gray Man, from.
The Gray Man, yeah.
Now, Francis's mother said that she saw that man the same day earlier, and that he came like shuffling down the street, mumbling to himself, making motions with his hands, like gripping him and letting him go, gripping him and letting him go. And she said, I thought I saw his thick gray beard, his drooping gray mustache. Everything about him was faded and gray. As we said, that's kind of how he got the nickname Gray Man. The McDonnell murder remained unsolved until the murder of Gracie Budd, who we'll get into shortly.
Gracie Budd, yeah.
The several witnesses, among them Staten Island farmer, said that he recognized fish. So he was starting to, once he got caught for the Gracie Budd murder, that's when everything kind of started to, unravel for him, so to speak.
Yeah. And that was his own making, because he got away with it.
Yeah.
Until he got stupid and he wrote that letter on that stationery, which was extremely unique. We'll get to it, how the detectives piece it together.
Well, I think before we get to her, we got to talk about Billy Gaffney. Remember the whole, everything that he done with Billy Gaffney? That, I don't think that was a letter. That was just a confession, but just that confession, it was worse. We're going to get into it here, man. Billy Gaffney, February 11th, 1927. He was with his 12-year-old brother, and they were playing in an apartment hallway in Brooklyn. This again is where another one would come from, the Brooklyn Vampire, his name.
Yeah.
The 12-year-old left for his apartment. Both younger boys disappeared. Beaton was found later on a roof of the apartment. When asked what happened, he said the Boogey Man took him. Gaffney's body was never recovered. Initially, serial killer Peter Kaczynski was a suspect in the murder.
Was there any relation to Theodore Kaczynski?
Yeah, I don't think that's that.
Unabomber?
Yeah. I don't know, it could be maybe Kowski. I can't really make out my own right here sometimes. Then Joseph Meehan was a motorman on a Brooklyn trolley, and he saw a picture of fish in the newspaper and identified him as the man he saw on February 11th, 1927, the same day the kid went missing. He said that he's seen this kid on the trolley, like kid was crying, begging for his mom, and he was with this old guy that was kind of dragging him around and telling him to be quiet. So to me, I mean, that's going to stand out, but I know you're talking, 1920s. I don't really know how proactive people were in stepping in situations like that, but I got to
different times.
I've got to think if I'm seeing something like that, it's raising a few eyebrows.
Well, it caught his attention enough that he remembered him. Yeah.
Definitely caught his attention enough to remember. I mean, this is years later, like I said, after he's in the paper for the Budd murder. But I mean, I would like to think that even if I didn't maybe say something to them, I may be calling the cops. But again, I'm saying that now because I have a cell phone in my pocket. Back in those days, I'm sure it wasn't easy to get in touch.
None of that. None of that. They didn't have public phones either. So I mean, they would have to find a local officer in a corner, or maybe take a note or something, or just do a sketch. A lot of people would do a lot of good sketches, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you had back then. Different time, hard to do good policing, but you know what? They pulled it off in this one. That's for sure.
Well, we're slightly jumping ahead. We're going to go back. This letter detailed this particular killing after he was already arrested. And this is one of the roughest things I've ever read. And I may even dub in something on this because I don't even know if I'll be able to get through it all.
I brought him to the Rikers Avenue dumps. There was a house that stands alone not far from where I took him. I took the G-boy there. I stripped him naked, tied his hands and feet, and gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took the trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked home from there. The next day at about 2 p.m. I took tools. A good heavy cat of 9 tails that was homemade, with a short handle. I cut one of my belts in half and slipped these halves in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bare behind until the blood run from his legs. I cut off his ears and nose. I slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones. Then I cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the grip. Then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below his belly button. then threw his legs about 2 inches below his behind. I put in my grip with a lot of paper. I cut off the head, feet, arms, hands, and legs below the knee. I put in a sack and weighted them with stones, tied the ends and threw them into the pool of slimy water you will see along the road going to North Beach water, about 3 to 4 feet deep. They sank at once. I came home then with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked the best, his monkey and peewees and a nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his nose and ears and pieces of his face and belly. I put in carrots, turnips, celery, salt, pepper. It was good. Then I split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his monkey and peewees and washed them first. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put it in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted about 1/4 hour, I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his ass with a wooden spoon, so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked all the way through. I never ate any roasted turkey half as good as his sweet little fat behind did. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his peewees I could not chew. I threw them in the toilet.
Unbelievable. What a sick guy.
For
What a
fuck's
sick
sake.
guy. That's a sick dude. I mean, he really had a thing for eating, cannibalizing young children. He liked the tender meat, and he would do the same thing with that girl later, and put in the same kind of detail how he did her also.
Yeah.
But it would cost him everything.
And just as a sidebar here, this is after he's been in prison and he writes this. They let that kid's mother know what he said, and she actually went to the prison and interviewed him or talked with him. And when he seen her, he refused to speak to her. He began to weep and just asked to be left alone. After 2 hours of asking questions through the lawyer, Mrs. Gaffney finally gave up, and she was unconvinced that it was fish that killed her son. And, you know, for her sake, I hope she's right, because maybe this was just a made up fucking story in his head that he did, you know, hopefully so. I mean, no child should have to, you know, be subjected.
Well, hopefully, yeah, they die quickly. The ones who are the worst are the ones that keep on keeping the victim alive and torturing them, you know, they don't let them bleed out and do horrible things, you know, like the sicarios like to do. Hopefully they if they're gonna, you know, it's gonna happen to you, die quickly. You know, Bundy was an expert just killing quickly and then dressing up and doing stuff like that. This guy liked to cannibalize them and, you know, tenderize the meat and all that. That's just obviously a sick dude, no doubt.
Now we're gonna get into Grace Budd here, but Grace Budd wasn't the intended victim in this whole thing.
She was not. It's kind of a fascinating little story, Wade, where he gets creative with this. I really found this to be extremely creative. He puts an ad in the paper looking for help to help him in a ranch outside the city, right? And this, I think he was 17 or 18-year-old,
18,
responds to his ad, 18, and he goes to the family's house. He meets the family, right? And he already picked up, before he got there, where I was researching, a location to do this, where he was going to take the kid. But then he saw his younger sister, and he'd rather have her instead of him. He got really lucky. Unfortunately, his sister was not so lucky. And he comes up with a story about his niece. He had a niece that had a birthday party. So remember, they just met this guy, which I found it's heartbreaking.
Well, didn't he make 2 trips? Didn't he come there twice?
He might have. I remember that part.
I think what they said was he came once, introduced himself, was going to take the Edward, and I think also a friend.
Right.
And then he left, told him he was going to send for him. He never showed up the day he was supposed to. And this is why I bring this up. He sent a telegram saying that he was running late and he was coming back and would be a couple days late. When he gets back, this time he brought like potted cheese and strawberries and stuff like that, telling him that it come from his farm. He asked for the telegram if they got it, and they said yes. Well, he takes it and puts it in his pocket. I guess to try to cover the tracks.
Sure, that's evidence. Yeah,
but that's when he meets the daughter, and it just really went off after that. I mean, that was
her name was
no longer his thing.
You said his name was her name was it Grace?
Gracie Budd.
Gracie Budd. Gracie Budd. Yeah, and he comes up with this fictitious story about having a niece that has a birthday party that night, that day. I was gonna bring her back. I mean, they just met. Really, they didn't know this guy that well, and you're gonna let your child go. Different times.
What I was wanting to touch on, man. I mean, I know that from what I gather, this was not a very wealthy family. So I know you have the aspect of they're going to be hiring their older son to do work. So maybe you don't want to take him off, but I can't be like just letting my kid go out with, some stranger that I just met. And I don't think the mom wasn't too crazy about it. Like she was kind of against it. The father was like, she never gets to go anywhere. She never gets to do anything. It'll be good to play with kids her own age. But what struck me as odd about this whole thing is the address that he gave her wasn't even a address. I forgot the specific number, but like the street stopped before it even got to that number. So there was no such address that he gave them.
Yeah.
But if she never come back, why wasn't he looked for automatically? Because I didn't realize until I started doing a little research, there was actually somebody else that went to jail for this and was in jail for about 100 and something days before they were found not guilty.
That's right. That someone else got. You know how it is when something like this happens, they got to put someone away, and he got set up. And what he said in that letter later, that he found her, he attracted her, and that's what he wanted. He put her in that house there, and I guess she realized that she was going to die, and she started weeping, asking for her mommy. She's going to tell her mommy about this. And that's when he strangles her, and then he commits house of horrors on her. And he does the same thing he did to the other kid. He puts in there. He took 9 days to eat her, and he cooked her little rump, and he really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're gonna read that letter too. The police arrested. I got it here. It was a 66-year-old superintendent. So I'm guessing the superintendent of the building that maybe they lived at. He was in jail for 108 days before he was found not guilty, and like I gotta think like. If she left with him and never came back, in my mind, that's the guy I'm looking for, not the superintendent. So I don't really, there's got to be something lost in translation there that I'm not.
Well, yeah, especially they got a good look at him.
Yeah. I mean, he was in her house not once, but twice. And
you got a good look at the guy. Yeah. I don't know how you get him confused. But different times and shoddy policing and, maybe they didn't want to say it was this guy, but if he was legit, he would have come back, right, and try to hire the other guys.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there was a story, and I don't know, sometimes things are added for dramatic effect on stories like this, but while they were on the train going to where they were going, he actually had his little implements of hell in a bag. And when they got up to get off, he had forgotten them, and she had to remind him, hey, you forgot your bag. And so he had to turn around and go get it. And that was the stuff that he would eventually use to cut her up. And, the girl was missing. Obviously, nobody had found her. The mom was actually illiterate and couldn't read. And they were unfortunately getting, and this happens from time to time, people will take credit for something even if they didn't do it, just to screw with the family. It happens a lot of times when people are missing, they get false leads and false hopes. And, I know where this person is or that. And they were getting these letters, and the son would have to read them. Well, this one, like when he opened it, she said it was immediately different. He just kind of started shaking, and he could tell that this one had some validity to it. And we're going to read this letter here.
Dear Mrs. Budd, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street. Brought you pot cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her on the pretenses of taking her to a party. You said that she could go. I then took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers while I prepared the room. I went upstairs and stripped all of my clothes off. I knew if I didn't, I would get her blood all over them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called for her. Then I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her. She told me she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. Oh, how she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death and cut her up into small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook it, and eat it. Oh, how sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her though. I could have had I wished. She died a virgin.
Now, I think later on the reports would be that wouldn't be 100% true. I think he did actually have intercourse.
I don't know if he had intercourse or not, but he said he did ejaculate twice.
Yeah, while he was doing it. Maybe that was it. Yeah, ejaculate twice while he was cutting her up.
While he was cutting her up while I was reading. I put that in my book there. But it took 9 days. Just think of that, folks. 9 days to eat her. And he acquired a taste for young kids. And you look back, and then that is true. When there's famine starvations, you see people do pick young children and they want to eat. And that's something else shocking for sure. Wow. Cannibalism is shocking.
Yeah, and they said that they looked into the people that he mentioned in that letter, but they couldn't find anything to confirm or deny that. But what was really crazy about it, this is almost like something that you would see nowadays. There was a hard-nosed cop, William H. King, right, that helped.
That's right.
And this is some savvy police work by this dude, man, back in those days.
He did a good job.
The letter that he wrote to him had an embedded emblem in there, NYPCBA, which was
right,
New York's Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association.
Right.
And so he was able to piece that together and know that it come from a certain area. It was a hotel. It was a hotel that gave those, right? He goes to that association. There was a guy there.
Association. And I think, yeah, an apartment he was staying at or something.
Yeah, he says that he took some and was in this particular apartment. So they go to the landlady of this room and they describe, who they're looking for. And they look at the login book and the handwriting matches. And so the name on it is listed as Albert Fish. And she said that Fish's son actually sends him money and asks her to hold it. And then he'll come get it. So they pretty much set up a sting operation waiting for him to come there. And I don't know what in your research, mine said everything went fairly smooth, even though he did pull out a razor. He was so old and slow. There was really nothing they could really do. I mean, it wasn't like he was a young man. He wasn't going to put up very much of a fight. The cop pretty much disarmed him. And at that point, that's when he was finally taken into custody.
Yeah, that was very good police report because they had kind of a description from when they said, remember all this happening. And then, of course, the handwriting matching and then that situation there. They got lucky. That was a very rare stationary. It wasn't something very common. It only went to a few locations and they will track him down. So that worked out well. Not so much for Fish, but it did for the family. A little justice there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, great. And like I said, I can't, tip my hat enough to the police work that this guy was able to do. Because I don't know if back in those times, I mean, they were maybe thinking that this was going to be a cold case or, unsolved murder. I mean, he just let it go.
Right. But they got a break. And him doing that, he would have got away with it if he wouldn't have written that letter. Right.
Yeah. If he'd never written that letter, they would have never been able to, which I'm glad he did. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They would have never been able to link it to him. And God knows how many kids he would have.
He would have kept on killing. And we will never know the exact number. I think he's been killing since the 1890s. So, I mean, so he's been killing for a long time. And at the end, I think when I was reading, the jury had a tough time convicting him. They thought he was crazy. But at the end, they did convict him. And then he was executed.
That was a pretty interesting point of emphasis because, even though he was on trial for his life here, obviously, they said he was caught napping a lot through the trial, not really invested in it. And it really boiled down to them trying to decipher just what he was. Like, was he crazy? Was he insane? Was he a psychopath? Like, they had experts on there that was battling, and even those guys said that this was unlike anything they had ever seen before. And I think the agreement they kind of come to, he might have been insane, but they still wanted him to die.
Yeah, exactly. Back then they could do that. Now if he's insane, they wouldn't do that nowadays. And this is New York. I don't think New York has a death penalty now. And he got executed in Sing Sing.
Mm-hmm.
Executed in Sing Sing, and I guess going to the executioners when they brought him in there, he was kind of acting like he didn't know what was going on. It's like, why am I here? What's going on here?
Yeah,
and
I think that was his last word was, "Why am I here?
Why am I here?" And he helped them strap him down and everything, looking like he had no huge face. And then they said, "Okay, well, now you got electrocuted." And that back then, Sing Sing was also called Old Sparky. Obviously, we think of the one in Florida, but that was another Old Sparky. And they took down Albert Fish on that one.
Yeah. And when he was found guilty, like I said, they said that when he was found guilty, like he was almost like happy because he's like, oh, what a joy it's going to be to get electrocuted. Like you're almost doing this guy a favor. He's still getting off the pain here, even though he's in jail and all this. Like he's looking forward to this one last hoorah. I mean, he's about to come and go all at the same time.
Yeah, this would be a big thing in New York City. The vampire of Brooklyn, the original boogeyman. He finally got his, and it was only right there, and that's the only case he got convicted of. With that one with Gracie Budd,
mm-hmm.
and it was years later it took down. In today's time, he may not get convicted of that, but because there's so much details that happened, that's what triggered this whole thing. Is I realized, no, this is exactly what happened. This was the guy that was here.
Yeah, and him including those details, like I mentioned, coming with the potted cheese and the strawberries,
the potted cheese, yes,
making the whole thing about the birthday up and the pretense of going to a birthday party.
That's the only person who would know that. The only person who would know that, the person that was there.
Yeah,
boom, and then the stationary head. He didn't think about the stationary head come back to bite him in the ass,
mm-hmm.
and it got him. But he truly, folks, was a sick man, sick individual, and he did unfortunately develop a taste for young children. And it's obvious there that he got into detail how he liked to prepare it. It's a sick people. But you know what? Cannibalism still is alive today, and a lot of people engage in it. It is really, really scary.
January 16th, I think, was the day that he did get fried. January 16th, 1936, like you said, in Sing Sing, they lit him up. There was a few issues, like when they were going, supposedly somebody said that it took 2 volts to shock him, and it was because something short-circuited because of all the metal and needles and shit that he had in him. But then they said that wasn't true, that his execution time was pretty much right in line with anybody else that had been electrocuted in those times. I think those might have early days, even gossip and rumors back then. But yeah, what they said, it was right in line with everything else. And his lawyer, I don't know if you read about that. His lawyer
the letters.
That he gave them some letters that he had, I guess, written, right before he died, apparently in hours just before he passed. And when pressed about it, the journalist said he would never reveal that. He said, I would never show it to anyone.
Yeah.
Like
I wonder if anybody did read it. I wonder if anybody did read those letters.
I'm sure somebody's got to have them, man. I mean, I find it hard to believe that nobody would ever get them. I mean, he had to show them to somebody, and I can't even imagine just the 2, like the one confession that we read about the little boy and the letter that he wrote. I can't even imagine. And he said that it was just, some of the most horrible stuff he had ever
things he ever read.
Yeah.
If it's anything like we just read now, it's par for the course with this guy.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe he didn't show them to anybody. I don't know. That's a good question to see if anybody's ever got. I don't really know who would want that. I don't know. I mean, I know some people are avid collectors of some strange shit, but I don't know if I would ever want that.
No, I don't really want it, but maybe it's interesting. It goes some sort of museum. I mean, we talked about, I think, last show, how the one of the museums had Bundy's Volkswagen Beetle,
mm-hmm.
right? And there's museums like that. I think it's called Alcatraz, East Alcatraz in Tennessee. And there's places like that will put stuff out that people can say, man, so people learn history. It's not something, a recent phenomenon. This has been going on for over 100 years, more, hundreds of years, this kind of behavior. Human behavior is sick people.
I mean, he started, this is that late 1800s, I mean, so you think now, like if this happened now, it would be a big deal now. This was going on early, late 1800s and early 1900s. This was going on, and all around the place. I mean, I'm definitely 100% sure he killed more that he didn't get caught on. But they said even outside of that he molested kids in over 20 something different states. That's not saying one in each state, just in 20 something different states that he moved in, because he worked a lot of time as a house painter. So this would give him opportunities to bounce from place to place, go in relatively unnoticed or, not being paid attention to, and just prime opportunity for him to be able to look around and seek out victims. It was perfect for something like him.
Lessons learned from the past: never leave your kids unattended, and especially with strangers. Even if they're working in your home or what have you, you never know. You never know what could happen. And these are people, like I said, they get in these jobs for a reason, to do those kind of things to small children. And he looked for a certain kind too. But look at how he treated his family, allegedly his kids, well. But look what he did to these other kids.
Did you read anything as far as like what his kids did, after he was found guilty of all this? Like, did they kind of just stay out of sight?
No.
Or I didn't really
I didn't see anything on there, but I'll do some more digging there also. But I just found his death, and I think he was buried. I don't think he was cremated. I think he was buried in that area in Sing Sing.
Yeah,
unmarked grave. He's an unmarked grave.
I think they had a marking for it, but I don't know who the hell would want to go see him anyway. I mean,
no.
And I know people have different opinions on the death penalty and all this, that, and the other, but I would like to think everybody that is listening to this show and the horrible shit that we've said that he did and committed to these young boys and girls, if anybody deserved the death penalty, maybe for a few seconds longer than required, it would be this guy. I mean, what a piece of work.
No, yeah, the stuff he did with small kids like that, and he was a sick individual. He was a truly sick, and he was a victim of, okay, maybe the abuses happened, but man, he just kept on and on and on and on and on and on. And he just, it was unbelievable how he got caught at the end. It's just, when I read it, I just could not believe it. I looked at the timeline again. It's like, man, it's 8 years. And then he wrote the letter. Wow. And he remembered everything. He knew where to send it to. He even had the act. That's impressive. All these guys can't keep track of anything, but he kept everything.
And two, and we kind of glossed over this, but once he got arrested, he actually took the cops to that house and showed them exactly where the house was. They started digging, confessed. And then they actually found the skull, which was her skull, and it confirmed, everything that he had told them. So they knew they weren't dealing with just some kind of whack job, because as crazy as it sounds, people do confess to shit that they didn't do. I mean, you look at how many people confessed to the John Benet Ramsey murder and found to not have anything to do with it. So in some weird way, that brings, I don't know if it's validation or attention or what people are looking for when they do that, or why someone will want to admit to something that horrible and they really didn't do it. But as crazy as it sounds, people do that sometimes.
No, they do. So if you like this story, we got a few more in my book, Psycho Killers. Check it out there. And I think we might be doing some more of these and doing some deep dive and some more of these serial killers.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, is all these guys, you can gloss over some of the high points in their, I don't want to say careers, but, past the destructions, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can go deep into a man and talk for hours. I mean, we glossed over Bundy, Dahmer, and Gacy, but I'm not opposed to going back and doing deep dives in them, because
there's so much in there.
Yes, looking back, so much stuff that they've done, and you wonder now, looking back, like, how did it go on for so long? How did it go unnoticed? And these people are all around you, man. You just don't realize it. You got to always kind of be on the lookout. My wife is very protective of our son. Like, he only goes to a few people's houses, like, and it's in that day and time where the kids like to roam about. But especially when you look up and research the kind of shit that I do and the kind of stuff that you write about, just what type of people are out in this world. And I'll be honest with you, if I seen a guy walking down my street looking like how Albert Fish looks, and I had never read the story, I would think an innocent old man just out trying to get a little exercise.
Yeah, no, you got to think twice, everybody, because I've read all these stories and you remember seeing them. You never assume that, even couples, sometimes there are couples get involved in this kind of stuff. Don't assume you see a couple, it's okay. Keep your chill. You don't know that stranger, danger. Stranger, danger. If anything comes out of this, don't give your kiss to a stranger to take to some sort of party.
Yeah,
give me a break, man. I don't care what time it is. I think it's common sense. I don't know you, And even your son going to work with this guy, that was strange also.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess in those days, that was how maybe job interviews were done. It's definitely different times. And
he was 18 though, so hopefully he could defend himself a little better.
Well, I think that's part of the reason too why he went away, because not only, like I said, was he going to take him, he was going to take a friend, and that kid probably could have maybe went to old Albert's ass there if he'd have tried something out of the way. The 10-year-old Gracie, not so much. And it's kind of
she got it.
As I was researching this, it brought back a memory, and I remember I was young. I was probably like 10 years old. I was home by myself, and there was supposed to be some people coming over to do work on the house, some painting. And somebody knocked on the door. I opened the door, and I felt a little comfortable because I recognized one of the ladies was a mom of one of my friends that I would hang out with in the neighborhood. She recognized me. She's like, "I'm Joey's mom." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I let her, and there was another woman older than her come in, and they started painting. When my mom got there, she was just kind of like looking at me like, "What the hell are they doing in here? You're by yourself." So I told them, I was like, "They knocked. I let them in." I was a kid, and especially since there was two women, my guard was dropped. Especially since one of them said that she recognized me, my guard was dropped. Well, later on that night, I remember my dad telling me, he's like, "Look, son," he said, "a woman can cut your head off just as fast as a man." He said, "I don't care who it is. Don't let nobody in this house by yourself." He said, "They could have done whatever they wanted to you." And the way said it, like a woman being able to cut your head off like that, it resonated me so much then that memory popped back in my head as I was writing, notes down for this episode. So I think sometimes that's what you need, man. People just need to have the shit scared out of them, and it'll last with them for a long time.
How about when you ride your bike by yourself? Now you think about it in the block, right? How many of us were riding our bikes or going A to Z, and I'm going to my buddy's house. I'll be back there. You never know who's out there, who's watching for kids riding their bikes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's part of growing up, but unfortunately, there's people who know and take advantage of stuff like that.
Yeah,
we all done stuff like that too. It's scary things to look at, but I think it's important, and we'll that's scary as enough. But then later we'll talk with the guys who that come inside your home.
Yeah,
like the Richard Ramirez or Joseph D'Angelo types who will be the night stalkers, right? And they'll come in your house while you're sleeping, and they'll come and get you in your own home. So there'll be another type of boogeyman, but for adults.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. I think this was a good episode. Ultimately he got exactly what he deserved. I'm not, sad 1 minute that they might have had to go 2 jolts on him for sure. It's good.
No, that's fine.
All I can say. But excellent episode, man. I'm looking forward. I think we'll probably have to do some more of these, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Wade. Sounds good, man.
All right, my friend. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Ignacio Esteban, and unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment, and I'll see you. We'll see you later, my friend.
All right, man. Peace out.